Between client meetings, managing your business, and everyday tasks, who has time to worry about website hosting? With Kinsta's managed WordPress hosting, you don't have to. They handle the technical stuff, delivering lightning-fast load times, enterprise-grade security, and 24/7 365 human-only support. Simply switching to Kinsta could make your site up to 200% faster. Kinsta's custom dashboard makes managing sites easy, with powerful features designed to save you time and effort. Plus, their free expert-led migrations ensure a smooth transition. Ready to see why Kinsta is trusted by thousands of businesses? Get your first month free at kinsta.com. That's KINSTA.com. Kinsta. Simply better hosting.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
Coming up on episode 226 of Wheel Bearings, we've got the Arcimoto Roadster, the Genesis G70. GM delivers Hummers and BrightDrop EVs. Rivian loses $1.2 billion. And we talk about the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and our first drive impressions, as well as an interview with Trevor Lai from Hyundai. All that and more coming up next. Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. This is episode 226 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam Abul-Al-Samad of Guidehouse Insights.
I am Nicole Wakelin, and we'll go with Forbes Wheels this week.
And I am Roberto Baldwin with Digital Trends.
Robbie, you've been driving something, or maybe I should say riding something a little different this week.
I have. So I have been riding the Arcimoto Roadster. Now, if you don't know who Arcimoto is, you might remember, if you follow cars and especially EVs in any way, you might know the Arcimoto FUV, the Fun Utility Vehicle. It is an auto cycle essentially. It's two wheels in the front, one in the back, and it has like this little bubble, almost, well, not a bubble. It's
a canopy.
A canopy, yes. It has a canopy, and you sit down in it, and you sit in it like a car, but it has handlebars like a motorcycle, and you ride it around. And the idea is it gets about 100 miles of range, and you use it to take care of like little things around town. You can take care of your errands. You might start seeing them in a lot of touristy areas in San Francisco. I know that they now offer them up for people who want to ride around the city and do the tour of San Francisco.
As an alternative to a Segway?
Well, they have the Segway, and then they have those little weird little go-kart things. The little side-by-side. Yeah, the little yellow go-karts that have a motor or are gas-powered. And so now those people are also offering up the Arcimoto FUV. So they have, the FUV. It's FUV on the Autobahn. So they have that. That's sort of their main vehicle, and you can do a bunch of things with it. You can make the back have a little bit more room. You can they're hoping to sell to municipalities as little vehicles to get around and transport. Maybe landscapers can use them, etc. Then they have this other thing called the Arcimoto Roadster, which is it's the same sort of platform, but it doesn't have the canopy. It looks more like one of those three-wheeled motorcycles that you see riding around.
Like the Can-Am Spider, I think?
Yeah, those things. Which for a long time I was always just like, about. But at the same time, like, you know what? If you want to enjoy the freedom of a motorcycle without like concern of tipping over, good. Because it's nice. The freedom of a motorcycle is great because you don't have anything around you. You see the world, but you also don't want to tip over. Tipping over is bad. Motorcycles are very heavy. So they have this Arcimoto Roadster. It's essentially that. It's an EV, and I have been riding around, and there's a bunch of little caveats I have to add here about about why I like it or reasons why maybe you should or shouldn't get it. But I actually really like this thing because initially they're like, "Hey, do you want this?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure, we'll take this."
Did you have it for like a whole week to drive around?
I still have it. It's in the driveway.
So you're just like tootling around town in this thing. I just was looking at
this little thing.
Their video. It's so cute. They have like a little gang of them going down the street. I want to get one and like drive. I want to be a gang in the little car. Those are cool.
So I like around these. Hassling shopkeepers.
Right, like we're the really toned down version of a motorcycle gang. We're coming at you with our little Arcimoto. Wee.
Like instead of leather jackets, we have like members only jackets.
Oh, perfect! Absolutely.
The soft kitten.
We have to wear bicycle helmets for safety. Yes.
With like we're like the Soft Kittens MC, the Soft Kittens Motorcycle Club.
That's perfect.
So, let me ask a question. What kind of license do you have to use either this or the original FUV? Do you need a motorcycle license? Car license?
No, you need a car license. So that's the bare minimum. In some states, including I believe California, you don't need a motorcycle license.
Well, it really is more car-like because it won't tip.
So it's more car-like.
Right?
But anything that you ride, you do have to wear a helmet. And again, that's always from state to state because Las Vegas, Hawaii, they don't have motorcycle helmets.
No helmet law here. Feel free to bonk your noggin on the road and kill yourself.
Yeah, states like that, just go around bonking your head on the ground.
Wear a helmet, please.
Please wear a.
This is me being sarcastic. Yeah.
As someone who spent decades not wearing a helmet, I'm a huge advocate of helmets.
Well, Michigan repealed its helmet law about 4 years ago, and we've.
Oh, really?
Amazingly enough, we've had a huge spike in serious injuries to motorcycle riders.
I don't believe you, Sam. The data lies.
I know.
The idea of
purely coincidental.
We've never had one here, I don't think, in New Hampshire, and people come screaming down our main road, like our highway, and they literally come over from Massachusetts, pull over, which is super safe on the highway, take their helmets off, put them on the back of their bike, and zoom back onto the highway going 65, 70 miles an hour.
That's dedication.
It freaks me out every time. Wear your helmet, but also could we not at least pull over not on the side of the highway, which is super dangerous, like you should not do unless you need to? You don't need to. Go to the next exit.
Unless you have a flat tire you have to fix right now.
Like, do not just put... It's a danger zone right there.
There's always those police videos of like the officer giving someone a ticket, and also the car just comes barreling into it, and it's always like a near miss or something. Yeah, that's what don't pull over on the freeway unless you absolutely.
We actually had someone. It was a child who was
because you never know when a Tesla is going to run into you.
Someone.
Yeah.
Those rogue Teslas, man.
Rogue Teslas. So. What were we talking about? Oh, the Roadster. Totally
gone down. Woo!
You were talking about the motorcycle club.
So I'm talking about the little motorcycle thing. So it has a top speed of 75 miles an hour. Oh, anyway, let me go back to my whole, if you ride anything that's even remotely like a motorcycle, I really recommend you take a motorcycle safety class and you get a motorcycle license. The motorcycle safety class will help you and make you a better driver. And the motorcycle license will mean that, if you do happen to have one of these and you go into a state where it does say, hey, by the way, you need to have a license, and you don't, they're not going to like hassle you and take your little auto, well, I don't even know what it is, motorcycle thing. So anyway,
anyway,
it has a top speed of 75 miles an hour. It has it's an EV obviously, and it has EV torque like all through the power band. Like I'm doing 50, I pull it right, you get some EV torque. You're doing 20, right, you get some EV torque. Off the line, there's not a lot of EV torque. I think they set the controller just so people wouldn't fly off of the damn thing. It has a range of 102 miles in the city. And then if you're doing 70 miles an hour everywhere, that just drops down to 32, which happens with a lot of electric motorcycles. Is if you're on the freeway, the range drops precariously because you are a giant board blocking the wind. As a human on the motorcycle would be fine.
Your body acts like a parachute.
Yes, you are essentially a parachute, just dragging, just destroying the range of your electric motorcycle. It is 3 wheels. It doesn't have power steering, but I do believe they're working on that. So it is difficult to sort of turn at low speeds because you're trying to turn 2 wheels with handlebars. It has a very low center of gravity. And so when it goes around corners, it's not going to tip over, but you may slide off. So you kind of have to lean in and brace yourself if you're trying to go fast. And then there's if you're a motorcycle rider, you know when you hit a bump, the action is you move up and down. The bike moves up and down as it hits a bump. Two wheels, they're running, in the same direction. With this, there's two wheels in front, but they're on the side. So in addition to up and down, you have a side-to-side movement, which takes a little bit to get used to. If you're used to riding, again, motorcycles. If you ride quads, you'll be fine. With this, it's a little bit, with rough roads. Having said all of that, sort of saying, well, it's kind of weird to ride. If you go 70 miles an hour, you'll get like 32 miles of range. Once you sort of get past the idea, like, I got to take this on the back road and do all these corners and all this stuff, which I did initially, and I'm like, this is kind of fun. It's way more fun to just cruise around town. Just cruising around, doing things like going to the store. It's got all these little storage spaces. It's got this little like cargo area in the back that you can put like a top box on or whatever. It's essentially like a cargo. What I say in our video for Engadget, it's a cargo bike for people who don't want to pedal. It's for lazy people like me. If you're incredibly lazy and you just want to cruise around town, you can get the Arcimoto Roadster. It's also very, very, very expensive for what it is. But
How much is it?
Okay.
Oh God.
Yeah, exactly. I think Sam, it is It starts at $23,900, which is so okay. So all the sort of these are the reasons why it costs so much. It's a new company. They've essentially built a new vehicle, so you don't have the economies of scale. You don't have this idea that you can say, well, we're building, 100,000 of them. Now we can sell them for 15,000. They don't have that yet. I have talked to them, and they said they really do want to bring the price down, but they have to sell more. And so, like I was saying with the fleet sales, I do believe they're probably selling these into fleets as well. So resort towns, places at the beach, Miami sounds like a place that would probably have these. Hawaii. Places, and you're probably going to start seeing these in addition to the FUVs and other little fun vehicles you can rent. So the more of these that they're sold within fleets, the more likely the price is going to come down. And so right now, to me, it's really for like first adopters, people who are just like, well, I got a lot of money and I'm going to get this because it's goofy and fun, or fleet sales. If you're someone who's just like, I kind of want something to kind of cruise around, it's a tough pill to swallow, that price. That said, it is fun. You can only get it though in California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona, and Florida. Again, places worth beach towns and stuff. I'm sure if someone from Hawaii called them and said, "Hey, we want to buy 100 of them," they'd be more than happy to sell them.
They'd be like, "Sure."
Yeah. So they're a relatively new company. They've been working on their FUV for years. I rode it at CES in 2017, I think, maybe 2018. I don't know. Years ago, I rode their FUV or drove. I don't. Yeah. And if you're looking for these fun, weird things, this is definitely it. It has heated seats. It has heated hand grips, which is great because it's been like 45, and I've been riding this thing around in like the coldest week of the year here in the Bay Area. Regenerative braking, all the things that you sort of expect from an EV. So overall, I like it, but there are the caveats that it's very expensive. It's kind of weird to ride when you first start it. And So Arcimoto Roadster, please send me your questions.
Have you ridden the Can-Am Spyder? And if so, how would you compare this to that?
I have not ridden the Can-Am Spyder. I kind of wished, I'm riding this thing around. I'm like, damn it, I wish I had ridden the Can-Am Spyder. They have not reached out to me. So I've never actually ridden their motor trike thing.
Because I'm looking at the Can-Am website right now as well, and those things aren't cheap either. They have one. They're the base version they call the Riker that starts at $9,000, but there's the Spyder F3 that is $18,000, and the Spyder RT is $24,000. So it looks like all these things are fairly pricey.
You have to. Because you have to add a whole other.
And it's obviously a lot more
dimension
complex
to it.
than a
it's a lot more complex than a motorcycle. So now you have to the suspension is now, you have to deal with two sets of wheels up front, and so it creates all this sort of complexity when you're building it versus a motorcycle where it's just like, okay, here's a frame, and now you need to be able to attach the suspension to here on the frame and the wheel, and the suspension in the back and the wheel, and this is where the motor goes, and this is the chain and or the belt that goes back to the motor to turns the wheel. Ta-da! And that's sort of the basics of a motorcycle. That's why they're initially they're sort of simple, and then all the motorcycle makers sort of build upon that to make it their own. And the technology that's in motorcycles now is bonkers. What Ducati and BMW are doing is just insane. The amount of technology that you're getting in a motorcycle is sort of crazy. Like, I got, you can get CarPlay on your motorcycle. You can get, you can adjust the suspension in order to the multistrada. I mean, it's in their name, but you can adjust the suspension so it's more of a cruiser or it's more of a sport bike. It actually moves up and down, like the suspension. You can watch it on a motorcycle, which 15, 20 years ago would have been like, well, here's your bike. This is what it does.
Go for it. Yeah.
Figure it out.
All right.
I think this next one. No, did you look at the show notes now that I filled in the boxes? So I don't know. Do we fight? I think it should be you.
You go first, and then I will add my thoughts in there.
Okay. So Sam and I have the same car this week, which we just realized when I popped it into the show notes just now. We are both in the 2022 Genesis G70. I am a big fan of Genesis, which I think I've said before. I still feel like this is one of the... You get so much luxury car for not luxury car dollars. Like it's hard to match up. You can't find the features in this that you will find in other luxury brands. You're going to pay $5, $10, $15, whatever $1,000 more. So this is has a 3.3 liter turbo. It is super unbelievably fun to drive. There is 365 horsepower, 376 pound-feet of torque, 8-speed automatic transmission. It has power in spades. I mean, if you want to go, if you hammer the gas, you will get a strong reaction from this. But it also manages to do that because it's a luxury car. This isn't like some aggressive, super sporty, just like all about performance, don't care about passenger comfort. It does it without being harsh. Like it's an aggressive acceleration, but it's nothing where you feel like this over harshness. It's not overly loud. It's very smooth as it does this. And once you get up to highway speeds and you're just cruising, it's quiet. It's easy to handle. You can have a nice quiet conversation with whoever's in the back seat and not have to raise your voice just because of highway speeds. And even if it's pouring rain, or in the case of me yesterday, giant snowstorm comes in and there's snow and ice. And I had a little winter vehicle testing in this. It's unbelievably quiet. And I have to say it handled beautifully. We really got like craptastic weather yesterday. It was icy, it was snowy, it was slippery. I had no problems with this. It handled really, really well. And this is rear-wheel drive. This wasn't, this handled unbelievably well in really bad weather, which I thought was a plus because sometimes, you have to get an all-wheel drive vehicle for that to happen. Sometimes in a rear-wheel drive, it actually is surprisingly good. And this was the kind of weather that would surprise you when you think, oh yeah, no big deal. It's only an inch or two of snow on the ground, but actually it's an inch of snow, then ice, then freezing rain, then a little more snow, then a little more ice. So it's actually pretty slick. And this did really well. So I like driving this. I like the power. I like that it's got plenty of power to move it along, but it's not aggressive about it. It remembers that it's a luxury car. And to that end, you have all the luxury fanciness inside. You've got, power steering wheel. You've got leatherette door panels, everything, a dual zone automatic climate control. Everything looks and feels beautiful, very comfortable. It feels and looks like a luxury car when you open the door. You don't have any doubt that this is a luxury van. This isn't a Hyundai. This is a Genesis, and you know it when you open the door. And you get all sorts of fancy safety stuff with this too. You've got, rear cross traffic alert, lane keeping, lane following, blind spot, rear occupant alert. So you get this. There's a lot of car here. So for that, and see, this is the thing. So for all of the stuff that makes this just a beautiful, well-equipped, comfortable luxury sedan, it's at 42.1. Now they added stuff on to the one that I have. You get a sport package which adds Some like you get 19-inch sport wheels, you get ventilated front seats, a sunroof. They upgrade the speaker system to a 15-speaker lexicon system. You get some, there's some dark chrome trims and stuff. That is a $4,300 package. And then there's an additional $4,000 package on mine that is a head-up display. You get Nappa leather seating surfaces, so fancier leather, microfiber suede headliner, Brembo brakes. So you get extra bits and pieces. So mine, as priced, was $51,945. So it's not like you're getting a $30,000 car here, but for basically $52,000, you're getting a lot of car. And that's what impresses me about this. It wants to be a luxury brand. It is. It wants to be a somewhat affordable one. And it is.
And
go for it, Sam.
Amazingly enough, mine was actually more affordable than yours, despite the fact that big difference that I had one with all-wheel drive, unlike the rear drive one you had.
Okay.
It was still the 3.3 liter twin turbo V6, so same 365 horsepower, but it had all-wheel drive, which, although we didn't get snow yesterday, we did get a bunch of sleet and freezing rain overnight on Friday night, I guess. Yeah, Friday night. So when I went out to go out yesterday, it was all caked in ice that had to scrape off. But on the all-wheel or on the all-season tires that were on this, it did surprisingly well, especially with the all-wheel drive. I didn't have the Nappa leather or the heads-up display, things like that. So this was the not obviously not the base trim, but just the standard 3.3T all-wheel drive version. There's also there was or is a 3.3T launch edition, which I'm not sure if those are sold out or if they're still available, but it's listed on the website. So the base MSRP on this one is $44,200 on the one I had, and with delivery it came to $45,745. And at that price point, this is really a great value, especially when you compare it. Its most direct competitor for this car is going to be the BMW M340i xDrive. And you can get the M340i either rear drive or all-wheel drive. Both of them have a 3-liter twin-turbo 6-cylinder, inline 6 rather than a V6. They have slightly more power at 382 horsepower, but the M340i starts at 54.7 for rear-wheel drive and 56.7, an extra $2,000 for all-wheel drive. So that's like what, $11,000 more than what the one I had for the BMW. And to be honest, I think I would probably take this over the BMW. I like the 3 Series. It's good, but this is absolutely a better value. You get so much for what you're getting, and it, as you said, it does feel like a luxury car. There are some premium priced cars out there that don't feel nearly as luxurious as what you get from a Genesis. So, yep. As part of the larger Hyundai Motor Group, a key component of all 3 brands, Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis now, has always been value. Clearly, Genesis models, the current lineup of Genesis models are a significant step up from what you get from a Hyundai or Kia. But you can see and feel that when you sit in the car. The seats are really comfortable. One thing that this year for 2022 models, they did get a mid-cycle update, so got a new front fascia, brought the design more in line with the rest of the current Genesis lineup. So they've gone to the headlamps, they've gone to the twin thin horizontal strips for the projector beam headlamps, so it matches what you get on the G80 and G90 and the GV80 and GV70. And similarly, the grille has been revised. It's a slightly larger than before, but it's not as it doesn't come across as obnoxious as the big BMW grill.
Nothing does.
It does. It works better than the BMW grill. So there's that. The back seat, in this is a little bit tight, for where I position the driver's seat. I'm 5'11". I get in the back. My knees are touching the back of the front seat. It's not. I wouldn't call it cramped, but it's definitely more snug than what you would get in a G80, which is no surprise. Shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But other than that, there's not really a whole lot to complain about. The only option that was on mine was the Adriatic blue paint, which was $500, and everything from Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, tends to be very reliable, very well built. So I think if you're looking for a premium, compact sports sedan, this is a great choice. The one other thing that they did change this year as part of that mid-cycle update is they dropped the option of the manual transmission with the base 2-liter turbo engine. You used to be able to get a 2-liter rear-wheel drive. Actually, I can't remember if they offered it with all-wheel drive or not, but you could certainly get the 2-liter turbo rear-wheel drive with a manual. That is no more. It's gone. So the starting price now, so everything's got an 8-speed automatic. The starting price for the 2-liter rear drive is $37,525, which is very, very reasonable. It's definitely less than you're going to pay for anything from Germany in this class. And of course, because it's Hyundai Motor Group, it does come with the sounds of nature in there. So you can, enjoy the sound of a Parisian cafe, or crunching through the snow, or walking through the woods as you go for a drive.
Which should seal the deal about why you should buy it. That one feature
Absolutely.
alone.
Exactly.
I think from now on, anything that doesn't come with the sounds of nature should just automatically be ignored.
Cross it off your list. Don't even waste your time.
Exactly. Not even worth your consideration. All right, so that's the Genesis G70. Last week, before Robbie and I recorded on our own last week, I think I mentioned that for the first time in the history of wheel bearings, all 3 current hosts were present in the same location at the same time.
And we didn't take a picture.
We were going to take a picture, but
then we forgot.
They said, "Hey, it's time to eat," and then I looked around, and I dilly-dallied, and so then I looked around, everyone was gone. I'm like, oh wait, I guess I better go find a chair.
So anyway, the reason why we were all together was we were in San Diego to drive the another product of the Hyundai Motor Group, the new Ioniq 5, the first of what is planned to be at least 23 different vehicles between now and 2025 using Hyundai's new eGMP, which stands for Electric Global Modular Platform. This is the new EV architecture that that Kia is using on all their upcoming EVs. This is the first one out. It will be followed in a month or so by the Kia EV6. In fact, Kia may even deliver a handful to customers this month before New Year's Eve. But in general, they won't really be available till probably sometime later in January. And we all had a chance to drive it. And we've got a number of questions. I put out a call for questions on the Ioniq 5 the other day, so we've got some questions about it. But what did the two of you think?
I really, really liked it, and I try to temper my expectations because I like the design of the vehicle a lot. When I saw it, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is the one." But then you're like, I think I talked about this with the RS6 Avant, where you're like, "Ooh," and then you're like, "Okay, what's going to happen when I get in this vehicle?" I got in, I was like, "Oh, this is really nice." It really does sort of deliver on the promise of what Hyundai was showing off, which again. PR, marketing, they have a job to do, and that's to make whatever they're selling sound like it's the best vehicle that's ever been made since the dawn of time. And I'm not saying this is the best vehicle it's ever been, but it is very, very good. I really, as an EV, as just a car, which I think is really important for a lot of people, is like, oh, it's a good EV. It's more important that it's a good vehicle, regardless of the powertrain. And I think that's really what this is. And I will talk for 30 minutes about it, so I'm going to stop talking now.
I'm in agreement. The thing is, this has very striking styling. It doesn't look like every other vehicle. Like made it look distinct. It has this future forward kind of look to it. What do they call? I keep wanting to call it, like they call it pixels, I guess. The little squares that are part of the design that go all along the back of that. And it carries through, and that's like inside the car in places, and it's sort of like it's like a little bit on the steering wheel. Like there's not even a Hyundai logo on the steering wheel. It's like not there. You're like, if it looks really cool. So you have that, like, okay, this looks really neat. Is this going to drive is really neat, or are you going to get behind the wheel and be like, wah wah, this is terrible? No, because you get all excited about how something looks, and then you sit down and you're like, well, I don't care how cool this looks. This is awful. It was really great to drive. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought, and the same thing that you said, Robbie. I felt like it was honestly one of the first EVs that I drove, and I sort of forgot it was an EV. I was just driving a car, which is nice. Like
No, it's a crossover. It's not a car.
Sorry, crossover. That you want to drive just a vehicle, a crossover. You don't want to say like, oh, I have a really cool EV. You want to just at some point be driving a thing and forget, like, the engine. Which engine? The fact that it's an EV should stop mattering at a certain point. It should just be a vehicle. And that's how I felt like this was. I enjoyed the fact that it had this very future-forward look, that it had just very roomy interior, but that driving it, I forgot. Yeah, like Robbie's like moving his elbows around.
So much elbow room.
There was elbow room that you sort of forgot that this was an EV. Suddenly it was just, you're just driving, and I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think, this is something, several years, the last several years, when I do presentations for clients in my role as an analyst, one of the topics I would bring up regularly, going back probably 4 or 5 years now, was as the EV sales continue to climb, and you start moving past the era of tax incentives for buying an EV, and it's looking today like that era is going to be coming much sooner than
sooner rather than later.
But one of the things, as EVs go mainstream, they're going to have to compete on their own merits. Regardless, people are not going to be thinking. Most people are not going to buy something just because it's an EV. They buy it because it meets their needs, or their desires. Which is maybe the way it looks, the way it performs, whatever capabilities it has, and this thing in most respects, does exactly what consumers are going to expect of it. And I agree with both of you. I like the design. I think in your gadget video, Robbie, you referred, you talked about it having kind of the look and feel of a 90s hot hatchback. And in terms of its proportions, I think it definitely has that, kind of that hatchback look, even though, it's a little bit taller. I think one of the interesting things about this is it's actually bigger than it looks when you see it, especially when you see it in photos, because the proportions are very much like a 90s VW Golf or something like that. But when you actually measure it, it's quite a bit larger than those vehicles. It has basically the same footprint as the Hyundai Tucson crossover. So it's like 1/10 of an inch different in overall length from the Tucson. It's a little bit wider than the Tucson, but it's about the roof line is about 2 inches lower. So it's taller than those old hatchbacks, but a little bit shorter than a typical, compact crossover. So it's very, similar size to a Tucson, RAV4, that sort of thing. A couple inches shorter than a Tesla Model Y or a Mustang Mach-E. But it still has that, a little more upright seating position of a crossover. And I really enjoyed driving this thing. I think it's fantastic. They're offering it with three different powertrain configurations to start with. Actually, initially there will be 2. So they're starting. There's 2 different battery sizes. There's the 77.4 kilowatt hour battery. That's the extended range battery, and a 55 kilowatt hour battery, which is the standard range. That's coming, I think, next spring sometime, or spring or summer. So you can get it with rear wheel drive and the standard range battery, rear wheel drive with the extended range battery, or all wheel drive with the extended range battery. And the rear drive extended range has a EPA rating of 303 miles, 220 for the standard range battery, and 256 for the all-wheel drive, which is what we all drove. That was the only one they had for us to drive, which has, I think it's about 320 total horsepower between the 2 motors.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, 320 horsepower. So, it's not going to it's not going to challenge, a Tesla Model Y performance, but it's plenty quick. It's more than quick enough for, what anybody's going to need. So it's going to be, 0 to 60 is going to be somewhere around 5 seconds or so.
Since you brought up the Model Y, I have to interrupt you. So while we were out taking photos of this on some winding, twisting road, a guy who owned a Tesla Model Y stopped, knew exactly what it was, and was like, "Oh my gosh, I drove by." He drove by and then turned back around and came back. He's like, "I drove by." I was like, "That's a cool looking. Oh my gosh, they have the Ioniq." Turned back around. I was like, "Is it okay if I check it out?" Talking to this guy, he was so excited about this car, and he said, "If this had been around when I bought my Tesla, I would have bought this. But I love how it looks. We opened the doors, we let him see it. He was really impressed. He and his wife both. They're like, this looks so good. This, and the affordability factor. They're like, the pricing wasn't out at the time that we talked to these guys even, but they're like, there's no way this is going to cost what my Tesla cost, but it's still going to. He was all in. This Tesla guy was like, I am all in for buying this as soon as it's out. And he loved it. It was the funniest thing to see him just go buzzing by us and all of a sudden come back to see what it was,
Pulling J turns on the middle of
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I think that Tesla's interested in this car.
I had a couple of people who were like, "Oh, is this a concept car?" I'm like, "No, this is a production car that you can actually buy as a person." And they're like, "Oh,
it does have the look of a concept, the style, and if you look at it, you think this can't be how it's really going to look when you get your hands on it." Yes, it
does. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it is definitely a striking looking car. Much more so than some of the other stuff that's out there. Especially one of the probably most direct comparisons would be to the VW ID4. And I like the way the ID4 looks, but this is definitely more unique. Without being over designed. I think it's a nice balance.
They're finding that balance of sort of this. To me, I called it retro futuristic because it has those little pixel lights, which is very 80s. But it does strike this really great balance of looking like the future and looking cool and looking different from anything else that's on the road right now, while not just going a little bit too far, not becoming the Aztec, not becoming something that looks like they went a little too, they got right up to the edge and they stopped. Yes. And they're like, this is where it's still good. If we keep going, it's going to become the Homer, from The Simpsons. So they got right to the edge, they stopped, and they're like, ta-da.
Well, and that's a trait, and it does. It managed to pull off looking different without looking so different that you're like, oh, something went wrong there. They say there was this old-fashioned thing where they said when you look in the mirror, you're supposed to look at one accessory and take it off. You shouldn't over accessorize yourself. And I feel like the Hyundai guy's like, okay, we got it all done. And someone's like, okay, let's take off a couple bits. Now we have the perfect car. They didn't go too far. They stopped at just the right point without we can throw all these other things. No. Designers, take that, take that. Now we have it looking just right. And what they gave us was just right.
It is unless something unless the ID Buzz comes out and it's affordable, which I don't think it's going to be that affordable. This is probably right now the front runner for our next EV, which is not for 2.5 years because we still have the lease on the Kona. But yeah, that's I'm like wow,
this will be it.
I want this. This is I want this in my life.
Yeah, and the pricing, the SE standard range, that's the base model that's coming probably middle of next year. That one will be priced at $39,700 MSRP, and just I think a $1,200 roughly delivery charge. And then, it goes up. They've got SE, SEL, and limited trims like they do on most Hyundais. The top of the line Ioniq 5 limited all-wheel drive will be $54,500, and those are the ones you can get right now, the SEL and the limited. I think you can also get the all-wheel drive SE as well. And then you still have the $7,500 federal tax credit available on that. So this is, there's some, I think this is a reasonably good. It's definitely a good value compared to most of what else is out there, and I think that there's probably something here in this lineup that will fit most people's needs. Even the rear wheel drive models with the extended range battery, you've got 225 horsepower. I think that's plenty. It's a little more power than what you've got in the Kona, and the Kona is great fun to drive. And this is rear wheel drive with the single motor, so it should be even better balanced than the Kona. And you can get an SE extended range rear wheel drive from $44,000. So this is definitely, I think, something that should be on most people's radar, is something to look at. There's some interesting features that Hyundai's incorporated into this platform. One is the fact that it's got an 800 volt architecture. So it's most EVs, including Teslas, current Teslas, have a 400 volt architecture, which is inherently going to limit how fast you can charge it, among other things. This has an 800 volt architecture. It's the first more mainstream vehicle like that. The only other ones that do that right now are the Porsche Taycan, Audi e-tron GT, and the Lucid Air. So they've adopted that. Hyundai's basically trying to future-proof this platform, and so that means that it can charge at up to 235 kilowatts. If you go to one of the 350 kilowatt chargers at Electrify America or ChargePoint, and it'll charge from 10% to 80% in 18 minutes, which is really, really fast. They did charging demos. We did charging demos with this thing, and as soon as you plug it in, if it's they plugged one in that was at 10% battery charge, and it immediately jumped right up to like 225 kilowatts, and then slowly crept up from there up to about 230 at its peak, and so it charges very quickly for most people's needs.
Yeah, I think people don't really think about the charging speeds. They think, well, it's range and this and that. But if you could charge that timing where like 15 minutes or whatever, that's just a little bit longer really than your car. Just a scooch right. Longer than your car, because I put the thing in the put the car, put the I forget, sorry. You put the pump into your car, the hose into the hole in your car, and then you go inside, and if you're like me, you just wander around, try to figure out what sort of new flavors of Red Bull are out in the world, look for some Fritos, look for some beef jerky, and I come back out, and it's probably about 10 minutes. If it's just a little bit longer than that, okay, I'll stay inside a little bit longer, or I'll sit in my car and listen to 5 minutes of a podcast, or listen to exactly one song. It's really not that long. And these, last night I had to go charge. I'm driving the Mini SE right now, which is also a really great car, but has very limited range. I plugged it in because I wanted to get it up to 100 for a range test, and I walked over and I got some Hawaiian barbecue because it's in a big shopping center. I'm like, I'm going to get some Hawaiian barbecue. So that's this sort of someone told me that when you're charging an EV when you're fueling up a car, that's what you're doing, but when you're charging an EV, you're usually doing something else. That's sort of the deal. So I went and got Hawaiian barbecue because I could just park it there, which, I can't just park my car at the gas station.
And walk away.
Because there could be a lot of...
you could, but it's not advisable.
It could, but you shouldn't.
You should not.
Another interesting feature they have is vehicle-to-load capability. So you can plug in an adapter, it goes into the charge port, and it gives you an AC outlet with up to 1.9 kilowatts of output. So you can hook up a power strip to that and run a whole bunch of stuff off of that. So if you're doing some glamping, you can have a bunch of power available for your morning coffee, or to charge up your laptop or whatever else you want to do. Hook up your blow dryer to that. So that's another, and theoretically you could also recharge your friend's EV from that, although it would be a fairly slow and tedious process to do that. It's like it's like plugging in your EV into your standard household outlet for that. So that's not particularly recommended, but you can do it. And then just to prove that this isn't a complete love fest for the Ioniq 5, there are a couple of minor flaws in this. One in particular that somebody else pointed out to me on the first night. That somebody had driven it on the first wave and was asking about this, and I realized, with EVs in cold weather, one of the things you definitely want to do, if you can, is take advantage of heated seats. Because they take a lot less energy to heat up the seats and keep your backside warm than it does to keep the air in the cabin warm. And to most EVs, in fact, most cars, period, there's usually dedicated switches for the heated seats. Usually somewhere on the center console, or somewhere in the center stack, there's a button for each front seat to turn on the heaters. Not in this car. It's actually buried in the touchscreen interface, and depending on what you're doing, it will take a minimum of at least 2 taps on the screen to get to the heated seats and turn them on, which I thought was something of a strange oversight for an EV.
I think it was annoying too. I hate it when you have to go into infotainment to find that. And I wonder if it was like some design thing, like because it makes things look cleaner because you don't have little toggle switches to turn on your heated seats. But it was cold when we were driving this thing, and I wanted the heated seats, and so it did actually. We're like, wait, in here we go.
I'm looking at the dashboard right now, and I'm looking at the climate. The climate controls are not hidden in the display. There's actually like a climate control. It has like little capacitive touch buttons, but right underneath where the temperature is, there is a space that because you can there's zone temperatures. There is a space between each temperature where you could totally put a button to turn on the heated seats. So maybe that's
it has to be that they just decided, like, aesthetically, let's bury that button. Everybody who buys this is going to live in California. It never gets cold here. Who cares? I don't know.
Yeah. So that's a bummer. I wish the seat went down further, but that's just me with cars.
Because you're tall. I think that was the first thing I said. Okay, so I walk up to Robbie at dinner at our little cocktail hour, and I'm like, hey, Robbie, I'm like, oh my God, you really are tall. I was like looking up at a giant.
Oh God, I can't believe we talk to you on the phone every week.
Every week, you're the giant I speak to every week. Oh my God.
But you're right though. You do have some physical controls for things like volume and to get to shortcuts to some of the various infotainment controls and also the climate controls. So that's good. We have a few questions that were related to the Ioniq 5. So let's see. Let's start off. Andrew Pappas asked, "How's the handling? How do the seats do holding you in? And the interior seems more minivan than hatchback." So I think we've kind of addressed the handling. I think we thought it was quite good. But any other thoughts you want to share on that?
He said that. What did it say? The interior feels more minivan than hatchback.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it felt like a minivan.
It's very it's comfortable. It keeps you in your seats. You don't it's nice. There's just enough side bolsters. You're not flying around like you're say I don't know riding an Arcimoto Roadster. So I think I think it holds you, and I think the seats and the interior is very nice.
I had a co-driver who was wonderful, who was driving more aggressively for various reasons on purpose, taking the corners really hard, and actually do stay remarkably in place, because it was the kind of driving where if you didn't have good bolstering, if you didn't have good seats, you'd be like, oh, I'm smacking the center console, I'm smacking the door, now the center console, now the door.
Yeah, no, the seats are very supportive. I was surprised at that. I was riding with Carl Brower, and they do the front seats do an excellent job of holding you in place, and they're comfortable and supportive. Having that big battery down low in the chassis, obviously helps the center of gravity, helps keep body roll to a minimum. I think overall body motions are well controlled. It does oversteer a bit, or understeer, I should say, a bit at the limit, which is fine. I think for the vast majority of drivers, it's a very safe and stable way to do it. Not a huge amount of steering feedback, but it's fine. I think you will enjoy driving this thing. We took it up. We drove up from San Diego up to Julian, which is up in the mountains. And both of you got pie.
There's pie. That's my pro tip. Go to Julian and get Julian pie. So good.
All right. I agree with you. I don't think it really feels much like a minivan. It definitely feels more like a hatchback. What about flexibility of the cargo space, and do the materials seem more upmarket? So I think we addressed the second one. I think the materials are fine. It doesn't feel as luxury as the Genesis, but it's fine.
It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like it's just sort of a parts bin. Here we threw some stuff in here. It feels.
I thought it was nicer. Like, I think it feels nicer than like an ID4. The ID4 feels a little bit like.
It does feel nicer.
It feels affordable, and I feel like the Ioniq 5 feels much nicer than an ID4.
And the infotainment system is never laggy. It feels.
Oh yeah, it just worked.
Yeah,
everything just worked the way it's supposed to. Good job.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's plenty of cargo space. I mean, the beautiful thing about a hatchback, is you have a nice large area. I think the official spec is 30 cubic feet of cargo space behind the seats, and about 66 with the rear seats folded down. And then Gupta AJ asked rear-wheel drive. As I said, it's available rear-wheel drive. That's the base configuration. We didn't have an opportunity to drive that, just the front drive. Or rather, the all-wheel drive. The all-wheel drive, the front motor is smaller, so it's rear torque biased. So it does feel more rear drive than traditional all-wheel drive. I thought that handling was fine. What about sound insulation and the road noise? Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk, because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings.
Between client meetings, managing your business, and everyday tasks, who has time to worry about website hosting? With Kinsta's managed WordPress hosting, you don't have to. They handle the technical stuff, delivering lightning-fast load times, enterprise-grade security, and 24/7 365 human-only support. Simply switching to Kinsta could make your site up to 200% faster. Kinsta's custom dashboard makes managing sites easy, with powerful features designed to save you time and effort. Plus, their free expert-led migrations ensure a smooth transition. Ready to see why Kinsta is trusted by thousands of businesses? Get your first month free at kinsta.com. That's KINSTA.com. Kinsta, simply better hosting.
What did you think about the road noise levels?
I don't remember thinking it was an issue.
Yeah, I don't think it was an issue. I did video with it, in-car video, and it didn't have to like yell over the road. And we were also, we were on back roads. We weren't, so some of those can be very, rough. Sometimes they have, more gravel than say your regular road on, in your neighborhood. But for the most part, I didn't have any. I don't recollect or have any road issues or road noise issues that either caught my attention or disrupted my video recording.
Okay.
Same. Yeah.
All right. And then the charging curve. I don't know how long did either of you watch the charging demo or at all?
I had to shoot video that day, and I was with somebody else who was shooting video, so I ended up not doing the charging demo, which is sort of a bummer.
Yeah.
I was with someone who was doing video, and we just didn't have a chance to get that. Yep.
Yeah.
I watched the first part of it, just to see how quickly it ramped up the charging. As I said, it almost from 10%, it jumped up to like 225 kilowatts right away, and then it stays there pretty steadily. After this, I've got an interview that I did with Trevor Lai, who's the director of product planning for EVs at Hyundai, and we talk a little bit about that in there. But basically, unlike the Mach-E, which at least in its initial form, when it got to 80%, it would basically step down from 80 kilowatts down to 10 at 80%. They've since changed that. They did an OTA update that changes that, but Hyundai is ramping down more gradually once it gets past 80%. So it's not that sudden step down. So it'll keep charging. I think full charge, up to 100% takes about 35 or 40 minutes roughly, which is quite a bit less than most of the competitors.
Yeah.
And then as a family car relative to competition, any additional thoughts on that?
You have the ID4, you have the Kona, you have the Bolt, and if you're like the aggressive like rock and roll family, the Mach-E. I think it fits in there really well. I think it has enough space for families. I don't know. I don't have a family. I know it has enough space for like dogs. It has that. I feel like it probably has, especially because it doesn't have that sort of curved back. It's more like abrupt. So you actually get more of that space, that cargo space, that square footage. Because sometimes you're like, oh, we have 60 square feet, but like, the rear window is at like a 30-degree angle, and so you're losing a lot of space to like, unless you're putting a lot of triangles in the back of your car, it doesn't. You kind of lose some space.
It's less useful.
Yeah. So I think as a family car, 4 doors, throw some people. I got in the back, took some photos. So I think it was comfortable if you have a small family and it's a great second car for a family. Hey, we're cruising, we're going to Costco or something.
I literally thought, it was actually funny because I was thinking about the family. I rode in the back of it for a chunk of time because the person who's doing video, I was like, out of sight, like hiding in the passenger side rear seat while he's doing his thing. I'm like
squeezed over in a corner.
Yeah, right. So you're like hiding in the back of his video. But so I'm in the back. So like I'm sitting in the back of the car. He's driving, and the front seat's pushed kind of far back because of how the camera's angled. And I thought, good Lord, there's a surprising amount of space back here. And I remember thinking this would be great if you had kids, especially if you have kids. Like car seats are varying sizes. For your family, you've got booster seats and like booster seats to the back that are pretty easy. But once you get into those like rear-facing car seats and the toddler seats, those things are ginormous. And you could easily put 2 in here. And I was thinking about it. You could even put like the rear-facing ones, which are the ones that are they're tough because of how they angle. Yeah, they're just super awkward. I'm like, you could legitimately put rear-facing child seats in this and not feel like you're going to have to scooch a little forward up front. Like, it was surprisingly roomy. That I literally thought of those questions while I was sitting back there. So those are my thoughts. There you go.
Yeah, as a point of reference, Motional, which is the joint venture company that Hyundai formed a couple of years ago with Aptiv, supplier, to develop automated vehicles and robo-taxis. They operate they've got a pilot program in Las Vegas for robo-taxis. They have selected the Ioniq 5 as the basis for their robo-taxi platform going forward.
Oh, wow.
So they're actually testing them in Vegas now. They've got them in running around in Vegas and a couple other places. And also starting early in the new year, they're going to have some of them running in Santa Monica with Uber Eats doing automated deliveries. But they chose this car as their robotaxi platform. And one of the factors you want to incorporate, for a robotaxi, it's got to be easy to get in and out of the back seats, because that's where passengers are mostly going to be sitting. It's in those back seats. So the back seats definitely big enough for at least a couple of adults. Three as long as they're not too broad-shouldered, it's definitely, I think, a good family vehicle. So I mean, for any of the current leading crop of compact crossovers, like a RAV4, CRV, Tucson, etc. If you find the backseat of that suitable, then this is very comparable to that.
Yeah.
It's similar in size to what you'll get with any of those vehicles.
Which is weird because it looks so small in pictures. It's an illusion. It's a trick.
Yeah, it is. It's an optical illusion because they push those wheels way out to the corners. That's the other interesting. This thing is the same overall length as the RAV4 or as the Tucson, but the wheelbase is 10 inches longer. So they really push those wheels out to the corners. So when you see it sitting there by itself without something else as a point of reference, it does look smaller than it actually is.
Yeah.
Which is fine by me. I don't have a problem with it.
It's like a TARDIS.
Yeah.
It's a TARDIS.
It's bigger on the inside. All right. Any last thoughts on the Ioniq 5?
None from me.
You know what?
Right.
I didn't turn on the sounds of nature. So
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So at least we checked it. Make sure it's there.
Yeah.
It works as it should, Sam? Okay.
Exactly. So, whatever residual sound does come through, in the absence of an internal combustion powertrain, you can easily drown that out with, the sounds of feet crunching through the snow or that Parisian cafe. So not a problem at all. It
So you're
works
good.
just fine. One other last thought on this one. In terms of availability, they actually they've started deliveries this past week in California. Initially, it's going to be available in California and about 12 other states, which either have a zero-emission vehicle mandate or where EVs are already selling in significant numbers. And then over the course of 2022, they want to ramp up and make it available pretty much nationwide. So if you don't live in a ZEV state, you may have to wait till the second half of the year to get one, or go to California or Texas or Washington or somewhere else where they do have them and buy it there and then bring it back to wherever your home is. But eventually you'll be able to get one.
One day.
Yes.
One day. Fingers crossed.
Assuming the chip shortage doesn't continue on indefinitely.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be tough to get these right now for the next year.
Yeah. All right. Here's my interview with Trevor Lai, Director of Product Planning for EVs at Hyundai North America. So we're here driving the new Ioniq 5, first of a new wave of dedicated battery electric vehicles coming from Hyundai, and also across the Hyundai Motor Group family of brands. You've had an Ioniq for 6 years now since the original one was launched, and that one was Hyundai's first dedicated electrified vehicle. Now you're transitioning to battery electric only. What what is the strategy going forward with Ioniq? Is this gonna? I mean, you're gonna have multiple models off of this. It's a sub brand for electric vehicles. Do you see it perhaps someday becoming its own separate brand, or is it going to stay part of the Hyundai family? How do you see that working over the long haul?
Well, Sam, you've touched on a really good thing, right? You've touched on the history of the Ioniq brand. So the versions of the Ioniq brand, you had the HEV, PHEV, and also the EV. Give consumers a choice of what powertrain suited their life. From that, like you said, 6 years, we've had a lot of feedback from those customers to try and make a even better product going forward. So what we have now, first of the many on our eGMP platform, is our Ioniq 5, right? Great range, great styling, great interior packaging, as you can see here as we're sitting in one. It's one of those things where I think it'll appeal to a lot of folks. As we release more Ioniq vehicles, I believe the company will be taking a look and seeing what direction we can go with that. So that piece still remains quite a bit under study.
Okay. What for this first vehicle, for the Ioniq 5? What was the thinking? Why this particular form factor? What was? Give me the background on how the company landed with this particular car.
So what we wanted to do for Ioniq 5 was the first piece. Range, we found, was a very, very important piece to the success of a product, right? We found that out through, of course, Ioniq Electric, but also looking at other competitors in market. So we knew that had to be a big piece right off the bat. Number two, we're always looking at trying to commonize more platforms, especially going forward. And if you're going to do that, and we also know the future is electric. So if you have all those three pieces together, you really have to have a dedicated platform with which you can build Ioniq 5 and, of course, future electric vehicles as well. You may have seen at Los Angeles Auto Show, or at least heard about the Ioniq 7 concept. That's something that I'm working on as well. An SUV, a larger SUV for the future. And so when you have all these pieces in place, you need to have something that can accommodate for best optimized platform for an EV. So you combine all those elements, needing dual motor, primarily rear drive biased, a large battery pack, all these things, you have something very specialized. And the great thing is, like I said, keep coming back to commonized platform. And the reason for that is it's not just a one-off. Some OEMs will just do a one-off. Well, that's a pretty expensive way to go about doing things. Do it right the first time, 5, and then we'll see more in the future.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned rear-wheel drive, and this is an interesting trend we've seen from some automakers, not all, over the last couple of years as they've started to launch new EVs. Hyundai has had pretty much, I think, almost all your vehicles since Genesis was still part of the Hyundai brand have been front-wheel drive based. Why? What was the thinking behind going to a rear-wheel drive architecture for eGMP?
Well, there's a couple of reasons that we think a rear drive architecture is going to work out pretty well. If number one, we always want to touch on the efficiency piece of it, right? So you heard earlier in our presentation for the all-wheel drive variant, it's very efficient because when you don't need the all-wheel drive system, the entire front axle is disconnected. The wheels are disconnected from the motors, so you have less parasitic drag that way as well. Also, because of the longer wheelbase, we feel that we have enough weight that we carry on the rear wheels to provide a better ride quality for the consumer. And through history, we know regardless of propulsion type, a rear drive platform is going to be a rear drive biased powertrain is going to be a better experience for the consumer. The last piece too, if we take a look at front wheel drive based EVs, those wheels are driven by a very high torque motor. Particularly in the case of Kona Electric, for instance, 258 pound-feet of torque. And the tires we've chosen for that seem to be holding up pretty well. But if you look at other front-drive-based EVs in a parking lot, like we are here today, you're going to see that a lot of advanced tire wear. And having all the torque and power sent to the front wheels, those wheels are also turning. What happens is the edge of the tires get feathered. And feathering, of course, both
significantly reduces your handling capability.
And not only that, but for NVH, you get a lot of tire noise when you have feathered tires. So all those things together kind of led to where we are today.
Okay. As far as this particular vehicle goes, let's talk a little bit about some of the design choices that were made. I know one thing that's interesting. You still have some physical controls for things like getting to map, navigation, media. In addition to the two large screens. That's something that on the Tucson, which is also relatively new, and the Santa Cruz, you went away from those and went to a full capacitive touch interface. What was the thinking there with keeping some physical controls in this particular vehicle?
So what we're doing here with the Ioniq 5, right? The buttons that we see here in the center stack, conventional terms, not even really a stack anymore because it's so compact. Yeah. And this is actually really a styling element. You see it over here where it's solid because it just continues all the way across. If you're going to have a solid piece here anyway, you might as well have some controls that are solid controls. We did hear from quite a bit of feedback. We need to at least retain volume knobs. We've done that here with the Ioniq 5. The other piece of it, while we do have a very large screens, we have found through our research that particularly with BEV buyers, they're very well in touch with the current and future trends of technology. So they're already using touchscreen displays extensively in their lives. They're not afraid of it. We have those elements here as well, not only for these two screens, but also for the HVAC controls here as well.
I think one of the really interesting features I've noticed in this car is this center console here, the armrest and the center console structure. Yes. There's a lot of cars where your armrest can maybe adjust forward and back a little bit, but this one, the entire console can slide forward and back. Where did that idea come from?
So the idea there was anytime we are building a concept for a new vehicle, and it doesn't matter if it's an ICE vehicle or an EV, as in this case, we do a brainstorming session with our market research folks and also our planning teams that we have at the Engineering Technical Center that we have there in Ann Arbor. And so we brainstorm about great innovations that we can do. And one of the things that we found through the skateboard design of this eGMP platform is you have a completely flat floor. You'll notice in the rear, there's no hump at all. Some of our competitors, they still have a hump for some reason or another. In this case, if you have a flat surface, you can do more things with it. So in this case, we decided we can slide the console fore and aft.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool idea. I think it gives people a little more flexibility in how they use the vehicle, depending on their physical stature. Like I know Jill Manello here would probably appreciate having the console a little bit further forward, given her height or lack thereof. And for listeners, I mean, we joke about Jill, but that we love her. She's great. So what are some of the other things that you've done distinctly differently for this car that you haven't done in the past? Whether they were enabled by the eGMP platform or just in general, things that you're going in a different direction for the Hyundai brand.
So let's touch on two things, right? So let's jump back about maybe 3 years ago or so. We had unveiled the Hyundai 45 concept vehicle. When that came out, people were like, whoa, that's the future of Hyundai. Oh, but that's just going to be a concept car. That's not going to be anything like that for production. Well, you look at the Ioniq 5 now.
Pretty close.
You take a look at that concept, that's pretty darn close. And so having show car styling that can actually be produced, mass-produced, efficiently was one of the things I think design direction is awesome right now. The second piece that we're doing here is something that Ryan talked to you earlier about, right? V2L, what we call our onboard generator. If you have a big battery pack anyway, people like plugging things in to charge their devices through USB outlets. And of course, if you take a look at, for instance, our Palisade or our Santa Fe, you have a 110 outlet in the second row. Well, let's take that a step further. If you have a big battery pack, let's convert that to 115 volts, and you can run up to almost 2 kilowatts, so 1.9 kilowatts of capacity for that system. And you can do it through the plug in the rear seats, or if you want with our optional Hyundai accessory, you can do that from the charge port from the exterior of the vehicle as well.
Yeah, you mentioned voltage. This is the first really sort of, I would say, mainstream vehicle that has adopted an 800-volt electrical architecture. Most other EVs, including even Tesla, are still at 400 volts. I think about the only other ones out there at 800 or more are the Porsche Taycan and the Lucid Air. How was that decision made? I mean, there's obviously some incremental cost associated,
of course,
with going to an 800-volt system.
Yes.
Some of the components cost more. So what drove the decision to use an 800-volt design for this platform for vehicles that presumably, at least some of them, will be relatively affordable?
So there are two elements that I like to look at with the 800-volt system. One, we talked earlier about the flexibility of the eGMP platform. So what that really represents is an investment into the future. 400 volts, it's been working great now, but what's going to be the next step, right? So 800-volt architecture allows us to do that. The why behind that is, again, coming back to customer research, one of the main barriers for shoppers is charge time. What if you're not prepared? You have to, drive a really long distance at the drop of a hat. Sometimes, life happens. You might have to do that. With a 800-volt architecture that we have in Ioniq 5, you can do the super fast charging. What is it, from 10% to 80% in 18 minutes or so? That's a really, really important piece for that peace of mind for the consumers. And the best messaging there is that it's standard across the board for all Ioniq 5. It doesn't matter if you have the base trim or the top of the limited trim. Yeah,
it was interesting. I think Ryan was mentioning earlier that particularly in Korea, a lot of the buyers in Korea live in high-rises, live in apartments where you don't have access to dedicated off-street parking like most or many in America do. And so EV buyers there are going to be more reliant on DC fast charging. And so having that ability to charge, that quickly with an 800-volt system, I think is going to be crucially important, and it's a good benefit for everybody, globally that gets access to these vehicles.
Right, and in that time you're looking at what, from that 10 to 80%, you're looking at about 200 miles of range. That's basically very similar to a top-up you might have at a gas station,
and not much more time.
Exactly.
Yeah. In terms of charging, from survey work that we've done at Guidehouse at my employer, one of the big barriers we've seen to EV adoption is access to charging and charging time. One of the challenges we have, is you have a lot of different charge networks, ChargePoint, EVgo, Electrify America, and others, and in the past, customers, drivers have had to juggle multiple accounts, have different NFC tags or whatever. You tap on the charger to initiate your charge. Is Hyundai doing anything to make that process more seamless, more friction-free for EV drivers?
So for that piece of it, we understand that that's a very common complaint, right? Especially those who've had BEVs for quite some time. We've seen that in the consumer electronics side of having all these different dongles to charge whatever device you have. And the best idea is, of course, to have a commonized standard. That's something that Ian mentioned earlier in our presentation. His side of the business is working on solutions for that. I wish I had more information for you on that. Not my forte.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's see. Are there any other things that people should be thinking about, with this? I think Hyundai so far hasn't gotten a huge amount of attention for its EV efforts, which I think is unfortunate because you've already had some really good EVs. Even though the original Ioniq range was somewhat limited, it was very, very efficient. The Kona EV has great range at a relatively reasonable price, and it's a lot of fun to drive. And this one as well. Are there any other things that people should be thinking of, when it comes to Hyundai and EVs, and why they should consider Hyundai among the leaders in the EV space? Presuming you do believe that.
Of course. The thing to note, of course, for Hyundai, we're known very well for America's best warranty. And if you're ever unsure about, how is this going to, it's fine now, great, new car, how is it going to be 8-9 years down the line? It's not a problem. America's best warranty is that for a reason at Hyundai. It is backed by our legendary warranty that will warrant these parts for a very, very long time.
All right. Well, Trevor Lai, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sam.
Always great to talk to you. Continuing on with EV deliveries, GM delivered the first examples of 2 of its new EVs this past week. They apparently delivered the first Hummers to customers, Hummer EVs. They didn't say how many, so this might be like 2 or it might be 10. We don't know. But some customers, and we also don't know if those customers are GM employees or non-employees. They didn't say. But there are apparently regular consumers somewhere that have Hummer EVs to drive now. And they also delivered the first 5 BrightDrop EV600 delivery vans to FedEx Express in Inglewood. So you may see these making your FedEx deliveries if you live in the LA area starting in the next few weeks. And over the course of the next year, both of those will be ramping up significantly in volumes, and GM will be finally adding more EVs to its lineup, since you can't actually buy a new Bolt right now, which was the only other EV that they had.
Ooh.
Right.
The BrightDrop, it's very interesting because they sort of came, BrightDrop is a startup. It got bought up by or invested or however you want to say it. Anyway, they
actually developed it internally.
So they have the GM overlords. But you have all these startups that are making these sort of delivery vehicles. And I did an article a few months back, and I talked to FedEx, and they made a very good point. Whereas if you're a big company or a small company or whoever, and you're looking to buy delivery vehicles, you're probably more than likely going to go with the company that's attached to a large legacy automaker, because that legacy automaker has service centers all over the country, and that legacy automaker isn't going anywhere. They're not the whims of the market or the whims of even though we have the shortage and the inability to build things right now. If you're a factory that needs to build, or a foundry that needs to build chips, are you going to build 100,000 chips for GM or 5,000 chips for a startup? You're going to go with the big money first, and then the startup's going to kind of get pushed back. So it's I think we're going to see a lot of these BrightDrop things everywhere. I think it's I think for for big companies and small, especially if you're a small company and you're buying an EV delivery vehicle, you don't want to buy like 3 of them and then have that company go out of business, because now you've gone out of business. So
right, and that it's interesting you mentioned that coming from FedEx, because there was another article that was published this week on The Verge from Sean O'Kane. He did a big long investigative piece on a startup called Change. I think that's how you pronounce it anyway. It's like Change with a J instead of a G.
Oh, of course.
And they were partnered with a Chinese company to do a very similar kind of large electric delivery van, and they had a deal with FedEx, and I think they delivered about 20 of these things to FedEx over the last couple of years, and it was supposed to be several hundred that were supposed to be delivered, and they were supposed to help FedEx with installation of charging infrastructure at their depots, and they had all kinds of problems, and basically they went out of business and completely shut down last spring. But FedEx is now suing them. They've got a couple other companies that are suing them because they paid for vans and stuff that they didn't get. So you're right. I think this is an area where the legacy automakers are likely to have a significant advantage. And Ford is about to start deliveries of the e-Transit, their electric version of the Transit, similar to the BrightDrop, not quite as big as the EV600, but I think for a business that relies on these vehicles to generate their revenue, knowing that the company is still going to be there 5 years from now and is going to have parts and going to have service centers to take care of these vehicles, I think that's going to be really important for a lot of these companies.
Yeah. And I do like the fact that they delivered the Hummer right at the end of the year. Which, automakers do this all the time. Hyundai's done this. The Ioniq 5, they've delivered a few of those. I think they delivered one so far that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But they delivered it within 2021. And I remember when they delivered the first Bolt, they delivered it at the end of the year, but they also delivered it in Fremont, which is where Tesla was building.
Yeah.
sort of like just that old school
PR
automaker.
people will do that sort of thing.
Yeah, we delivered 3, I think it was 2 or 3 Bolts in Fremont, California, and they don't say anything about Tesla in the press release. They don't.
Yeah.
Just
they're just driving by because it was before the Model 3 had come out, so they beat the Model 3 to market. And yeah, so that's always a fun we're gonna have it by the end of this year, which means sometimes they're gonna have 3 of them delivered to 3 people on the last 2 weeks of December.
Yeah, that's automakers often do that sort of thing.
Technically, they did it.
But we did it technically.
Yeah.
We did it and we're technically right, which is the best kind of right.
Well, and when Ford did the reveal of the Mach-E in 2019 in LA, they actually did it in Hawthorne at Hawthorne Airport, which happens to sit right next to a company called SpaceX. I can't remember who owns or who runs that company, but
some Twitter guy.
Yeah, he does spend a lot of time on Twitter.
Yeah,
and they used the actual reveal event. They did it in the same hangar, which a few days later was used for the reveal of the Cybertruck. It's where Tesla does all their reveals. So and they did demo rides during the day. Driving around the perimeter of the SpaceX headquarters. So
Nice.
if Elon was there, looking out the window, he would have seen these things driving around circles around his building all day long. So.
Probably just got in his private plane and went somewhere else. He's like, I don't need to be here for this.
I'm out. Taking my plane, I'm leaving.
Taking my private plane, I'm going home, wherever that may be at that point.
I think it was still. Bel Air at that point is where most of I think he still owned 5 houses in Bel Air at the time.
Only 5.
Well, I think he's sold them all now because he moved to Texas, so he doesn't have to pay California income taxes. Anyway, another EV startup had their first quarterly earnings report this week with Rivian. They went public a couple of months ago, and at an enormous valuation. And they reported their Q3 earnings with a $1.2 billion loss in Q3. They finally gave out some numbers on how many trucks they have delivered, which was 386 R1Ts. Actually, 384 R1Ts. There was also 2 R1Ss, the SUVs that they delivered this past week.
They did? I didn't even miss that. Okay.
Yeah, it was. They talked about it in their in the analyst call afterwards. I wasn't listening in on it, but the reports I listened to, they met RJ Scaringe, the CEO, mentioned that we delivered the first 2 of the SUVs this past week, just before the earnings call, and so. It's not, it's a very slow ramp up. They technically started production in September, and they said, that it was going to be a slow production ramp while they finished getting things sorted out. And they're also, apparently, from what I've been told, they are focusing more right now on production of the delivery vans for Amazon than they are on the R1s. Since Amazon invested $4 or $5 billion into Rivian and ordered 10,000 of these vans, it's not surprising that they would.
They don't want to end up like Change with a J.
Yeah.
To avoid that.
Yeah.
Here's your vans, Amazon.
So you'll be seeing a lot more of those Rivian vans coming in making deliveries in your neighborhood in the coming year. I think their target was to try and deliver 10,000 of those vans by the end of 2022, and a few hundred of them by the end of this year. They also announced that they were building a second factory in Georgia near Atlanta, and they're investing $5 billion in this factory. Do you think that it's what they also reported that they have 70,000 pre-orders for the R1T and the R1S, which is about a third of what Ford has pre-orders for the F-150 Lightning.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe it's a little premature to be spending $5 billion on a second factory?
So they have, right now their current factory, the capacity is 200,000. So if they're doing 100,000, if they have to do 10,000 and then 70,000, they're still under 200,000 for their year if they, as they're ramping up for 2022 production. It'll probably take them a year to finish that factory from now. So I guess they're very much being like, well, we're going to do it. We have the money. Let's do it now.
They big hopes for future numbers that are much higher than current numbers, and so they'll be ready?
I've driven the R1T for 30 minutes off road, and it is a very good truck.
It's quite good.
I'm having it delivered tomorrow, and I'll have it. I can talk about the next pot like a proper, like more than 30 minutes driving around in mud. But there are a lot of people who have been asking me about this vehicle for the last few years, more than the Cybertruck, more than the F-150 Lightning, more than the Silverado that'll be unveiled. And so I think they are hoping that they can continue getting the hype. I mean, they beat the Cybertruck to market, and I think to them, I'm sure they're all like, yay, throwing confetti in the air. Of course, they're not building anything else. Tesla has to build all these other vehicles and other. Tesla's hitting the issue that everyone else has when they're building vehicles. Like, we want to make a new one. Oh man, where do we make that at?
Yeah.
So I think.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla is going to deliver probably somewhere north of 900,000 vehicles this year, which is getting into real automaker territory.
Yeah. So I think 600. Once they have both of these made, they'll have 600,000 annual capacity of their vehicles, which is, they still have to make the 100,000 for Amazon over the next however many years. And they're probably anticipating that once people see the Amazon vans on the road, they'll have other customers who'll want to buy these. And then, they're hoping that the hype machine keeps going. And we'll see. But yeah, $5 billion. I mean, if you're going to get that shareholder, that investor money, like, you should do something with it, I guess. And if you're adding it to infrastructure. If you're adding it to infrastructure for your company, you might as well just go for it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I think in the earnings report, I think they said at the time, at the end of September, they had about $5.5 billion in cash on hand, and that was before or $5.2 billion. That was before they got the proceeds from their IPO, which is about $13 billion. So they're on target, for the end of the year to have, somewhere around $19 billion in cash on hand. So they've got the cash. They don't have to borrow money in order to do this. But they're also, right now, as long as they're not building very many vehicles, they're also burning cash at a fairly prodigious rate. They had negative cash flow of about almost $1.2 billion just in Q3. And it'll probably be close to that much for Q4 at least.
So they spend $5 billion on the factory. They burn through $1.5 billion per quarter, which is about it's 2.5. That's almost $5 billion. So they have $10 billion. So they still have a few billion left over for next quarter, for next year, for 2023. They're good. They'll be good
through at least the end of next year.
Yeah. I mean, they're not having to borrow money, which Tesla had to do. Tesla had, they had to borrow a lot of money in order to do the things that they do. I think they're like, well, Tesla did it, but they borrowed money. We're doing it without borrowing money. Let's do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, to Tesla's credit, they actually didn't really borrow very much money either. They just kept going back and selling more stock, and people kept buying it. So, they actually had surprisingly little debt, given how much money they lost over the last decade. It was comparatively small.
The EV stock market is just bonkers to me. Like the valuations of like some of these EV companies, and if you have that valuation, you have the money, you should really use it. At some point, someone's gonna be like, what? Maybe these aren't worth as much as we think they are. It's like the housing market. At some point, people are gonna be like, oh wait, Toyota makes way more money and way more cars than Tesla, and so does Ford and GM. Hold on. I think as everything's sort of like fizzles out, that's when they're going to be like, oh, we should have used that money to buy a factory. Darn it.
Yeah.
Missed a chance.
And I mean, even though Rivian's stock price did drop after their earnings report, it dropped about 10%. Rivian is still worth, despite having delivered 386 trucks in the quarter, it's still worth more than Ford in terms of its market cap.
$83
billion market cap versus $79 billion for Ford.
I think if we sneezed, like in the time of a sneeze, I think that's how many. That's how long it takes Ford to make 386 F-150s.
Yeah.
It's just they made $1 billion just since we've been recording this podcast.
Yeah. Well, they build about. Assuming they have enough chips, they build about 120 F-150s an hour across the two plants in Kansas City and Dearborn where they build it. How
much?
60 an hour from each plant.
Jeez,
120 an hour.
Yeah. So that's
15
about
minutes.
3 hours of production for the F-150 is what Rivian delivered in Q3.
3 hours.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible.
It was like everyone got up, they got to work. It's like between getting to work and lunchtime. That's how.
Yeah.
Yep.
Up to the first break.
Up to the first lunch break. Yeah. All right, we're worth $15 billion. Let's go.
Bam, we're done.
We're done.
Okay. We've got a couple of other questions, and let's address those and then wrap it up for the week. Let's see. Andrew Pappas had another one. He had a question about how the chip shortage affects parts suppliers that don't need chips, like things like seats, glass, etc. How are those companies affected by the reduction? The thing that I think a lot of people have come to realize with the chip shortage is you get thousands of parts in a vehicle, and for most of those parts, if even one is missing, it becomes very hard to ship the truck or the vehicle. You basically have to have every single one of those parts. Automakers have been finding ways to leave a few features here and there out, but for the most part, they've had to either pause production or stockpile vehicles while they wait for the parts that they need. So when they pause production, that means everybody else that's shipping parts for those or that's making parts for those vehicles, they have to pause production as well because they don't want to be stockpiling those parts. Yeah. So glass, seats, tires, brake pads, everything else that goes into a vehicle, those get paused as well. So there's a cascading effect throughout the economy.
Yeah, if you're like ham making something, if you don't use any chips at all in your production of your part, and then you're like, hey, we're future, we're proof, we're defended against this chip shortage. Nope, because
no, you're not.
Car production is only as quick as the slowest supplier.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's generally estimated that for the auto industry, for every direct job at an automaker, there's about 7 other jobs that are directly impacted at suppliers and various other service providers. So there's a large cascading effect from this industry across our entire economy. All right. Finally, from Sean Whitehurst, we have, hello, Wheel Bearings team. Perhaps you can answer a few puzzling car questions I have. Why is there no indicator light that your headlights are on? The only indicators are for parking lights or headlights, and then for high beams, which with daytime running lights, drivers may think they have headlights on in some situations. I've also been in well-lit cities at night and second-guessed if my headlights were on.
Oh, that's an actual, that's a real thing. I've driven around. I used to drive around with my WRX, not realizing that I was just cruising, because it was like the first car that I had that had just running lights on all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, wow, it's really dark. What's going on? I'm like, what's happening? And it didn't have like an indicator that said like, oh, your headlights are on because it's nighttime. It was just everything was really dark. And then I turned it. I'm like, oh, okay. And now we have, a lot of cars have those auto, so it just turns on when the sun goes down and does its own thing. But yeah, I think there should be something.
Well, a lot of cars actually do have separate indicators for headlights and your parking lights. Some don't. Some combine them into a single one, so you don't know what's actually on.
You don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
I have driven with my parking lights on, like when it's a brightly lit city and you think your lights are on, and then all of a sudden you get to a dark spot or a tunnel, you're like, man, it's really not well lit. Like you said, oh, crud, my lights are on.
Yeah. If you have a car that doesn't have a digital instrument cluster that still has, traditional mechanical or electromechanical gauges with, physical needles and stuff, one indicator that your lights are not on is if your instrument cluster is not lit up.
Right.
And I've had that. I've noticed that sometimes I'll pull away and, then look down at the gauges and realize, oh shit, lights are off because the cluster is dark. Now with a lot of modern vehicles that do have a digital cluster, those are going to be on anyway.
And it's really bright.
Yeah.
Because it's fighting the daytime.
Yeah.
So you don't know until it gets darker. So in your brain, it's backwards.
But if you do have gauges, you'll be able to tell from that as well. That's another indication. All right, continue on with the light theme. Why have lights never been connected to wiper usage? Anything beyond the quick pulse single swipe should be accompanied by lights on, as is the law in some states. It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it does seem logical that if you're going to have the wipers on, your lights should probably just come on automatically, don't you think?
Yeah, they have that. I think that's a law in California, where if your wipers are on, your headlights have to be on. So
right, but why not just
make
tie
that
them together?
Automatic? I wonder what happens. Well, then I think what happens is you get into the intermittent issue. Like, does it stay on? Did you just do that because you had a little bit of there's a little bit of
so
fog?
now your lights have flipped on for a few minutes. Now they're off again, and now they're on, and then
Do they stay on the whole time because you have it's early in the morning, you have that sort of weirdness that's going on. I figured, to be fair, they should still just come on. I mean, a headlights on during the day isn't hurting anybody.
I know.
Does it really a harm if your headlights are on? I don't think so.
No.
There are some people out there who, find themselves deeply offended by other people driving with their headlights on during the day. I have generally done it, for much of my life.
Yeah.
But some people hate it. I have no idea why. It's never bothered me if somebody else has got their lights on during the day. With my car, my Miata, I generally don't turn the lights on during the day, because they're pop-ups. But with other cars, I often do. So
that's such a. Why would they be? Because now modern cars all have running daylight.
Yeah.
The headlights are on all the time.
Right.
So now I'm like, why are they so angry?
I don't know.
Hey! It's daytime. Stop that.
I know. I've seen complaints from people. It's like, I don't want daytime running lights on my car. How do I disable these? How do I kill these?
Why would you? I don't understand the wanting to disable something that essentially is a safety feature.
You can't even.
I don't want these damn seatbelts. Get rid of these things. Yeah. How do I unbolt these?
How dare you? How dare you impose your lights on philosophy on
All right. One last one from Sean. Why do SUVs get to tint rear windows? Is the true mark of a crossover versus a wagon? I legally tinted my TSX wagon in Connecticut, and the maximum tint on any door was minuscule. Had my vehicle been lifted 2 inches at the factory, like a Subaru, it would not have been a car in the eyes of the law, and I would have had the tint. I could have tinted the rear windows more dark. If it's for police safety, then why not larger, higher vehicles with more places to hide things be allowed more tint? This has puzzled me for years.
Why? I don't have why? I don't know. Who do we ask that? Now I want to know. Would that be an engineer question to ask? Would that be a designer question to ask? Who's in charge of that?
I think it's actually a legal question.
So do we need a policeman?
Well, because actually,
I need an answer to this one now. I'm curious.
I will check with a couple of people that I know with knowledge of the law. But my guess is that SUVs are generally classified as light trucks, which at least the way the law has, the safety regulations were set up, before everybody was driving SUVs, light trucks were considered more commercial vehicles. more like delivery vans and things like that often don't even have any windows on the side and in many cases on the back. And so, tinting the windows darker for those vehicles was not an issue. Whereas, cars, anything that's classified as a car, has a lower limit on the window tinting. I think it's just because they're classed as trucks, and trucks, are allowed to do that. But I will dig into that one some more. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that one, Robbie?
The only thing I know is that in California, you can't tint your side windows, the windows like for the driver and the front passenger, because the police can't see into the vehicle as they walk up to it.
Right, but what about the other windows?
I have no idea. I'm not even sure what the I just know those windows. I think you could just do whatever you want with the back windows. You can just, spray paint them black as far as I know. But
I'm literally sitting here texting the only two police officers I know, like, hey, dude, do you know why? So I'm trying to see if I can get an answer this very minute.
And I think because it's such a weird, because it's you can do it on this but not this. I don't think a police officer is going to pull you over for, on this car it's
why?
this, on this. I don't know.
I can't
Who
see
knows?
them pulling you over unless it was like your windows are practically tinted black or something, So they're. But I just
and on a lot of SUVs, everything from the rear doors back around usually is like really dark tinted.
Yeah,
and they're hard to see through.
It's to keep the people from staring at your children. I don't know. Don't look at my kids. You can look at them if they were in a sedan, but not in this car.
All right. Well, that's all we've got for this week. And thank you, everybody, for continuing to listen. And if you listen to it this week, happy holidays, whatever holidays you happen to celebrate.
Oh, that's right. Christmas this week.
Festivus.
Right.
It's Festivus this week, too.
Festivus for the rest of us?
For the rest of us. Yeah.
I do Christmas, so I'm going to say Merry Christmas to all the Christmas people.
Happy Krampus Day or
Krampus.
Whatever floats your boat. Enjoy, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Geico makes it easy to get affordable renter's insurance in as little as 90 seconds. That way, you have more energy for harder things, like the laundry. Why is it so difficult to fold clothes? They just end up wrinkly anyway, or on the floor in a pile that just sits there, taunting you. But with renter's insurance through Geico, at least you know that those clothes and the other things you love are covered. Get more with Geico.